Motes of flame and spark shine and flutter, yet leave no cinder behind. Travelers light their way along a road found only by the thief. Extra stars bob within the mire's reflective waters. No, they are difficult to find. The whispering, spirited tones relay not promises but lies, deceit, and hungry grief. This nonsensical poem has more sense than first glance can attain, albeit with the obvious intent of beating the bush rather than savoring a slice of the chase. This near prose reads more akin to a caution that waxes poetic, rather than a poem that gives playful warning. To this end, I would heed its phrases with a strong literal interpretation, where you see flame without evidence of burning, or see travelers safely traveling along a road that cannot be found. Or should you know the positions of the stars well enough to spot those who do not belong within the water's surface, remove any sense of desperate hope, and guide your mind to calm and sensible logic, lest your imminent agony become a meal voraciously craved by the Will-o Wisp, and the evils that lurk within the many shadows its haunting light casts. Excerpt from The Ire of the Mire, author unknown.
Hey there, creatures, and welcome to Encounter This, a podcast exploration of the creatures from Dungeons & Dragons and the lore that surrounds them. Well, hello there, creatures, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Encounter This. I am your host, James Hinky Punk Kid, coming at you with my co-host, Freeman Stingy Ice Tin, and today we are going to be looking at those magical little poof light balls known as Will-o Wisps and found on the Monster Manual in page 301. Tell us about them, Freeman.
Well, this is a nice classic creature. They've been around for a long time, since 1E. A Will-o Wisp is a wispy ball of light with a malevolence that haunts battlefields and lonely places. Basically, dark magic and fate bind them to these places, and this is where they feed on fear and despair. Very familiar theme from the last recording. Although I'm not sure if we did this in the right order of recording, so I might get confusing. But
we certainly did not.
Okay. It's, spoiler alert, there's something like that in the next episode. But they usually appear in the distance, like a lantern bobbing in the night, or a torch, or similar to the cantrip or spell Dancing Lights. So these little balls of light, their color may change, and sometimes the light will simply wink out. But when it does appear, it usually is seen as a sign of hope or a sign of safety to a desperate traveler. And that's very particular because you kind of need to be a desperate traveler for to have this feeling of hope and safety when you come across it. That's sort of its shtick. Because
kind of a beacon in the night, if you will.
Right, because the hope and the safety is very, very far from the truth. The Will-o Wisp often guides these unsuspecting travelers into things like quicksand pits, lairs of monsters, or other dangerous places.
Okay.
And they just feed on the suffering and bask in the screams of the dying that they lure. And then
these are so much more malevolent than you would initially set them up to be.
They are nasty little bastards, yeah. And their victims also have a chance of rising as another Will-o Wisp, as their spirit rises above its corpse in a woeful flickering flame. Essentially, a Will-o Wisp is the soul of someone, usually an evil someone, who died in misery and anguish while wandering places steeped in magic and considered forsaken or lost to time. And these places often tend to be bogs, swamps, battlefields, etc. Always places that are filled with sorrow and blanketed in fog and mist. And these creatures, are trapped at these places and eternally seek to draw more to their own fate. And essentially, misery loves company among these things. Rarely speaking, though, they occasionally vocalize in whispering tones, both faint and distant, which is something I didn't really expect. I didn't expect them to actually make any sort of vocal emanations. But they do on occasion, and they sometimes form relationships with other evil creatures, like our constantly coming up hags, Oni, which we just recently covered, and then, of course, other things like evil cultists or black dragons, or I would imagine any evil dragon that resides in these sorts of areas. And these are basically just these alliances are just another form of a trap for the Will-o-Wisps to utilize, so they can drink in that agony of the victims when they fall to their cohorts. They they really love to sit and savor every last gasp and breath as if they're like delicious morsels. They're really just so cruel, if not able to necessarily impose that awful torture and everything upon their victims themselves. They love to be around it and just take it all in. That's essentially all of the 5e lore right there. That's it.
Okay.
There's not much to them in that regard, but it is very... It is like it's almost obsessively evil how they describe them. It's just really nasty.
This is the kind of creature that I don't mind if they're like kind of vague, because anything beyond that veil of the mortal coil is and I guess should be kind of vague. Aside from the living undead and the undead.
Right. Totally. With a bit of stuff from 3E, they actually described them a little more physically in that they are apparently made of a spongy matter and are, of course, transparent, other than their glow. So they're about 1 foot in diameter, weigh about 3 pounds, and they have no actual vocal organs of any kind, but could emit ghostly sounds to communicate. And they typically turn invisible when surprised or frightened, usually avoided combat if possible, and luring their victims usually meant taking them away from the beaten path or trail. So, of course, that lines up from 3E to 5E. The rest of that, I think, is just interesting information that I don't see why it was left out. But it was.
I wonder if it was a page count thing.
Maybe, yeah. And then first edition, there's a couple extra things as well. In first edition, they were known to have total spell resistance.
I love that.
Yeah, there was only 3 spells that could affect them. One was Magic Missile, one was Protection from Good and Evil, and the other one was one I was not familiar with, called Maze.
Yeah, I'm also not familiar with that one.
I'm just going to pull it up real quick, because it is a 5e spell. In fact, it is a 8th level conjuration spell. This is probably why we're not familiar with it, because... We seldom find ourselves with that kind of power. But essentially...
And nobody playing wizards.
The spell reads that so it's a conjuration, it's a wizard spell, concentration up to 10 minutes, range of 60 feet, single action, verbal somatic. You banish a creature you can see within range into a labyrinthine demiplane. The target remains there for the duration or until it escapes the maze. The target can use its action to attempt to escape, which it does if it makes a DC 20 intelligence check, so on and so forth.
That's cool. I like that a lot.
If it succeeds, it escapes, and the spell ends. When the spell ends, the target reappears in the space it left. So it's just like it's sort of like this really interesting, different banishment. Although it does have in parentheses here in the spell that a Minotaur or a Garistro demon automatically succeed. I don't know why. I guess they're probably related to literal labyrinths and mazes in some way. I know Minotaurs, I think, are in historical lore or whatever. So little exception in there. I don't know anything about the Garistro demon.
Yeah, I don't know either. The Minotaurs definitely are. It's Greek mythology. The Minotaur of Crete, I think, and they're called Minotaurs because they're from Minos, if I remember. But it was Theseus.
That all sounds believable.
It was Theseus who successfully orienteered the labyrinth to find the Minotaur at the center.
Mm-hmm. No.
More on that in our Minotaurs episode.
Absolutely. Whenever it comes. But yes. So I just thought that was a neat little tidbit from first edition. They're also known to show exceptional levels of intelligence, apparently. But that's about it for extra stuff. So how that total spell resistance plays out in 1E versus the newer editions, I really couldn't say by comparison. I'm not really familiar with 1E very much. So, but yeah, interesting little tidbits there. But that's pretty much all I've got for D&D lore on these guys.
Right on.
As far as cultural lore, I had to really pick and choose what to put in here because there was a boatload of stuff.
So much. Yeah.
And not all of it's all that interesting. It's just like a lot of really specific accounts or like non-specific accounts. And, it was a lot of like various references here and there. So I had to, because, me, I tend to get carried away and add too much. I really kept it super simple. Essentially, the lore, I can tell you right now, is sort of just adds right up. Will-o Wisps has definitely come from a large variety of regions across the world and countries. So you, of course, will especially hear them in English and European folklore. They definitely appear in the Americas, North and South, even going as far as Australia.
Them in Pixies, right? Was it Pixies we teased Will-o Wisps in?
I can't remember if it was Pixies, but I know we mentioned them in Blood Hags as well. They kind of just sort of came up in passing as a passing thought with the hags turning into a ball of fire. So,
right.
But so we have there's a bunch of interesting names for sure. We love names. So like in the European, some European options would be like Will-o Wisp, Will-o Wisp, Jack-o'-lantern, Friar's Lantern, Hinky Punk, and Hobby Lantern.
Okay. That's where we teased it. It was Jack the Lantern, King of the Fairies, or King of the Pixies, or something like that.
Right.
I think it was Pixies that I teased that in.
Sure.
Okay, I'm looking for. Did you do any of the Jack the Lantern, King of the Fairy stuff?
No, not really. I have a little bit on Jack o' Lantern.
Okay,
but I'll come to that in a little bit. As far as like North American names, they're usually typically called like spook lights or ghost lights or just orbs. There is the Latin term for them is ignis fatuus. Ignis meaning fire, fatus meaning foolish, silly, or simple. So a literal translation would be foolish fire, but apparently, according to the wiki, which is like more idiomatically, it's usually translated as a giddy flame.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's various other things that pop up across the world that are very reminiscent of this. So in Mexico, you have the bruja, which meaning witch, and witches in their sort of folklore could transform into balls of light. They also have ones that are sort of the opposite, these actual helpful balls of light, the luces del dinero or luces del tesoro, which are money lights or treasure lights. So they actually help you find like lost and buried treasure, but they'll only help you if you have a child there to help with them. So they interact with children or something like that. And then from there, there's a type that appears in Brazil called a boitata, which means fiery serpent. In Argentina and Uruguay, there's the Luz Mala, which means evil light. Colombia has the La Candeleja, which is footlight. In China, there was a Chinese polymath named Sheng Hua, who recorded a sighting of something akin to the Will-o Wisp in his book called The Book of Dreams. And there was the Bangladeshi one called Alea, which means marsh ghost light. And it's said to trick and confuse fishermen specifically. And even Australia has a Min Min light, which is known to show up in the outback after dark. And the list just goes on and on, to be honest.
I believe you. I 100% believe you.
Yeah, so I just thought, get a little variety in there. But yeah, they just appear all over the place. So, of course, same thing. They're said to just mislead travelers by resembling the flickering flame of a lantern or a lamp. and they're described as atmospheric ghost lights, usually seen over bogs, swamps, and marshes. And no real without getting into specific historical lores from the world. There's no universal these things are evil, but they usually are seen in this the same way. Like looks like safety. You're probably out in the wilderness a bit desperate, and then you follow it, thinking it's something else, and finding yourself a little bit more lost, probably.
Gotcha. That's a little harrowing.
Yeah. The etymology is kind of the cool thing about, or one of the cool things I think about this, or in particular jack-o'-lantern, actually. But like wisp, it actually just refers to, and I thought this was kind of interesting, it actually refers to a bundle of sticks or paper that is used as a torch. That's like the original or the oldest sort of meaning of the word wisp. The current definitions, if you Google it, is like definition 1 is a small, thin, or twisted bunch, piece, or amount of something. And then definition 2 is a small bunch of hay or straw used for drying or grooming a horse. But yeah, like just a little bundle of something. And then will literally just refers to the name will. I always interpreted it instinctually, I guess, as in like, the will of something. But it's not.
Me too.
Yeah. And I don't know where will comes into that. And why it's Will-o the Wisp, which would essentially mean will of the torch. However, jack-o'-lantern, which is another sort of version of Will-o the Wisp, or at least a reference to Will-o Wisp in its own capacity, actually is attached to an Irish legend of a character named Stingy Jack. Are you familiar with Stingy Jack?
I am not.
It's actually,
but just based on the name, we do not believe this or endorse the beliefs of this, I'm assuming, racist tale you're about to tell.
No, not at all. Actually, it's not racist.
Oh, okay.
It is steeped in Christianity, though. But basically, Stingy Jack was just a terrible, drunken, deceitful, evil person. This dude who just got drunk all the time and just like scammed people, and he was like really clever and just scammed everybody, and he was so good at this and so awful that he caught the attention of Satan himself. So Satan went to check in on him, essentially went to visit him, and managed to be tricked by him twice. And I won't go into detail, but it's gonna be part of the show notes or the reading list to go read this story in full. But how he tricks him is just kind of silly. One of them is like he literally gets him to go up an apple tree, and then he places crucifixes all around the tree so Satan can't get down.
Okay.
But because of this, he basically makes an agreement with Satan that says, I'll remove all these so you can get down, if my soul is never allowed to enter hell. And Satan agrees. But then when Stingy Jack dies, he goes to heaven, but because he's so evil, he's refused at the pearly gates, so he can't get into heaven. And then he goes to hell's gates, but because Satan struck the deal with him, he can't let him in. And instead, Satan gives him an ember to light his way, which is then placed in a hollowed turnip. And in this particular historical sense, apparently it's actually a rutabaga. But this ember sits in this hollowed out sort of root vegetable. And thus, Stingy Jack, or Jack of the Lantern, is born. And he's doomed to wander between the plains of good and evil forever.
Okay, the rutabaga actually makes more sense than a turnip, because that's like fist size, whereas turnips can get real big. So that explains the size of the Will-o Wisp, at least.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I thought that was kind of a cool little legend that has produced to the jack-o'-lantern, and it does apparently kind of weave into All Hallows Eve, which is why we, of course, are familiar with them when Halloween and all that. And just that was pretty cool, but much more interesting than what I found available for just Will-o Wisp itself. But, to some degree, they're essentially the same thing, so.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I'm wicked curious about how it evolved from a rutabaga to a pumpkin. That's that's kind of a stretch.
I mean, I would guess just because, I would assume that they had turnips, rutabagas, pumpkins, squash, gourds, aplenty. These are pretty hardy vegetables in the old island of Era. But, if they were to
way easier to carve a pumpkin, I guess.
Right, exactly. Yeah, putting a light inside of one and carving one and getting something more detail out of it. It's just a larger thing to work with. But we've also got a scientific explanation for this, which I think is maybe a first for us, because these little balls of light and sort of luminescent things in swamps and bogs very much do exist. And of course, history being what it is and how hilarious it is, and you can just make shit up all you want. All this folklore just came from the misunderstanding of a literal natural occurrence, a natural phenomena, which is essentially a bioluminescence or a chemiluminescence. And in particular, we have phosphine, diophosphane, and methane. All are able to ignite when they come into contact with oxygen in the air in their own capacity. And so these things will naturally occur in swamps and bogs and marshes due to organic decay.
Right.
And so, yeah, they actually, they just kind of lift out of the areas and the bogs and the water and stuff and ignite in the air. So there are literal little tiny balls of brief fire that appear. And that's probably why it's so universal, right? Like these things.
Yeah. It's also, I don't know if you have it referenced or what you would reference specifically, but I can't call back to a specific example, but I remember like at least 3 or 4 different instances of something on TV, like a government official agency just brushing something off as swamp gases.
Right. Yeah. You'd probably be surprised to know, though, that suspicions of these things being of the natural gas are actually recorded as far back as the 16th century. So,
yep, that does surprise me.
Yeah. So as much as everyone makes shit up, in 1596, the earliest mention of this was in a book by Ludwig Lavater, something like that. In a chapter of his book, the chapter was called "The Many Natural Things." The chapter of the book is called "That Many Natural Things Are Taken to Be Ghosts." And I say this for last because the title of the book itself is hilariously long, and lots of really crazy variation or early spellings for words. I won't get into them, but this will very much be in the reading list. But the book is called "Of Ghosts and Spirits Walking by Night and Strange Noises, Cracks, and Sundry Forewarnings, which commonly happen before the death of men, great slaughters, and alterations of kingdoms."
I think Death Knell might have been a shorter title, but I get that you really want to capture everything that's in your book in the title at that time.
Yeah. So he was not messing around on what kind of ground he was covering, eh?
Nope. That's a quote from Back of the Box these days.
Yeah. A couple of fun facts about Will-o Wisps. Not much here, but like in literature, they're usually referred to in a metaphorical sense, and the theme is often in referring to hope or goals of someone that are impossible to reach, or to someone they might find the goal sinister or weird. So it's appropriate, I suppose. And there are like notable examples. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but I do recommend hitting up the wiki page for anyone listening to like just go look at some of these to read about these sort of sightings, if you will. Like the St. Louis Light in Saskatchewan, Canada, is a famous one. The Spook Light of southern Missouri, Marfa Lights in Texas, the Naga Fireballs of Mekong, Thailand. Fuck yes.
Yeah.
I love that one. The Paulding Light in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and the Hessdalen Light in Norway. So those are all like really, really cool, like little tidbit stories and stuff that you can go read. And I'll throw that in the reading list as well.
But, yeah, sweet. They all sound awesome.
Yeah. I love Naga Fireballs in Thailand.
Yeah, that's such a metal name.
Yeah. What are we going to do now? We got to do Minotaurs and Naga soon.
I've actually been thinking about doing Nagas.
Oh, yeah? That'd be a fun one.
Yeah, I watched, what's the show on Netflix called The Art of battle, I think. It's the story of like the three men who unified Japan after like took it out of its feudal state in the late 15 early 1600s.
Oh yeah.
And the first guy to really start off the process is called Oda Nobunaga. So, like, I've just been trying to research, like, what the fuck does that name mean? I know both of those words. Like, I know Nobu and I know Naga. Like, what does it mean in this context? And I haven't been able to find fucking anything. I think it's probably some shorthand for dragon, but...
Yeah. That'd be sick.
Yeah, it immediately made me think of 5e Nagas.
I guess that brings us to in case no one's picked up on it so far. We're no longer in the middle of our heat wave, but we're not far off.
We're actually in the middle of another heat wave.
It's not the original heat wave, it's the new one, and we're feeling a bit sluggish all over again, which is why a nice delicious milk stout.
Nice room temperature milk stout. Keep you cool.
Keep you cool. And definitely not coat your throat.
Just got a new keyboard, so I'm trying real hard not to splash this.
Oh yeah, that's how I ruined my last one. It served me many years, and then beer happened.
Yeah. But the Strange Fellows Blackmail Stout. It's about as dark and rich as the Will-o Wisp.
Indubitably, except the Will-o Wisp is, I mean, I guess metaphorically dark. You were going for, right? Not actually dark. Yeah. See how it took me a second to like click into that. That's bad.
Metaphorically
not
dark
on fire today.
and lore rich.
Yeah. Sometimes you get more energy by drinking, but when you're this warm, you just don't feel like drinking.
No, I'm ready for a nap, man.
Yeah, seriously.
I haven't done anything today, and I'm ready for a nap.
Well, let's get to the old mechanics of Will-o Wisp. You'll note that I actually changed it to Will-o Wisp this time, into the creature that I'm doing in our show notes. I remembered.
I do note that. That's fantastic. I also note directly below that you appear to be missing something.
Yeah, I just noticed that. I forgot to put the CR in. Luckily, I know it off the top of my head.
Okay, sweet. So this is so take me through these guys.
Yeah, this creature is a very debatable CR2. And it's got an HP at 22. It's not high, but it does have an AC of 19, which is fairly high. And it is a
massive at
tiny
second level.
creature.
It's like unobtainable.
Yeah. I feel like it's that because it's tiny, and as much as it didn't specify in the 5e lore, it's not the sort of creature that actually goes toe-to-toe with you, right? It would probably run away. But it's tiny. It is undead. It is chaotic evil. No surprise there. It does know the languages it knew in life. It does. This does not specify whether it speaks them or not, but I would go with the the whole faint, ghostly sounds. Maybe it doesn't like communicate directly per se, but it does know languages.
Right.
We've got a boatload of resistances and immunities, essentially. Resistance to acid, cold, fire, necrotic, thunder, and the physical, non-magical. So quite a list there. Straight up immune to lightning and poison. So even more. And
yeah, those are pretty standard undead.
Yeah,
so.
True enough. And then exhaustion, grappled, paralyzed, poisoned, prone, restrained, unconscious. Can't have any of those. Which all makes sense. It's a tiny ball of light.
I think those are also pretty standard undead immunities.
Yeah. I mean, grappled is definitely, and restrained.
Yeah, you could definitely grapple a skeleton.
Yeah.
But I get why it's here for this one, yeah.
But that would be gross. Don't touch it. Dark vision, 120 feet. Passive perception, 22. Nothing crazy there.
Okay.
Sick. It is worth noting, I didn't write it in here, but it is worth noting that Well, these creatures have a 1 strength and a -5, and middling across the board otherwise, like 14 whiz, 13 intelligence. So they're not stupid. They are like relatively intelligent, all things considered. They have a dex of 28.
What?
Yeah. It's a +9 in their stat block.
What?
And a
Why do they need that much?
-5 to their strength. I don't know. I guess they would just have a really wicked reflex dexterity save for various things because they're so tiny. But otherwise,
Yes,
like it,
+9? That's so high.
yeah, and it doesn't really get reflected in the stat block too much because we'll jump right into that, like in the attacks and stuff, because they have like basically one attack. It's called Shock. It's a melee spell attack. So despite these things being little balls of fire in real life and just light in D&D lore, they do lightning damage. It's a +4 to hit with a 2d8 lightning. So I don't know where the +4 is coming from exactly.
I'm guessing it's spell. So
it's
I got the
'cause it's a
stat
spell
block
attack.
open here.
Yeah.
So it would be probably its wisdom is its spellcasting ability at a +2, and then another +2 is proficiency bonus.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I did put that down because I knew it was going to be relevant somehow. It is a melee spell attack specifically. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Its other attack or action is just invisibility. It does operate under concentration rules, and but the wisp and the light just become invisible until it attacks again or uses life drain, or in whatever capacity its concentration ends.
Okay.
So I'm sure you're quite curious about life drain, but I'm going to save it for last. We have a couple like minor sort of abilities. There's one here that I don't think we've seen before. It's called Ephemeral, and it just essentially indicates that this thing cannot wear or carry anything. That's it. It has incorporeal movement. I know we've covered that. Treats other creatures and objects as difficult terrain. If it ends its turn inside the object, it takes 1d10 force damage. And then it has an ability called Variable Illumination. It's a bonus action to alter, but it can basically shed bright light between 5 to 20 feet in radius, and then a dim light in additional amount equal to the bright light chosen. So that's pretty straightforward. But then we have, and I did make a note of this because I don't understand why, but in the invisibility part, it says until that uses life drain, but it doesn't have an ability called life drain. It has one called consume life. So they definitely typoed in this one. The ability consume life or life drain, whatever you want to call it, is also a bonus action. And this is where things get dicey, especially for a level 2 party, because it's a single target within 5 feet of a character that is 0 HP but is still alive. So essentially rolling its death saving throws or is stabilized. And as a bonus action, it forces the target to make a DC 10 con save. It is versus magic specifically. And if they fail, they die.
Yeah.
And if the target does die, the Will-o Wisp regains 3d6 HP. So cool, but also what the hell? Because I know DC 10 is low, but at level 2, it's very likely at least one or two of your party members has not dumped anything to con. So that actually, and depending on what their class choice is, that could actually, be a 50-50 chance, genuinely. And it's, the death saves are as well, but you have to do 3 of them. This one's a one-time deal kind of thing, as a bonus action, no less. So, quite the ability that could cause a really early insta-death. I mean, it could cause a late insta-death if they still haven't dumped con at all, right?
Yeah. Even if they haven't dumped con, it's still a save or die. 1 in place of 3, which the odds are remarkably better on 3 saves than they are on 1 save. That being said, people fail all 3 death saves every day, I'm sure. I understand why you think this is a dubious CR2, but I don't.
Well, it's CR2 if you're facing one of these by itself. I get that, It's gonna be
but you're not facing one of these by itself. You're not facing and you're not facing a swarm of these.
Yeah.
The reason I think it's CR2 is because it doesn't. The idea is that it exists and it's part of a combat, so you bump the combat itself up by 2.
Right.
But the only reason to have this in combat is for consume life. Like it just floats around invisible.
Yeah.
And then at the end, if a player gets down to their last little bars, you throw in a consume life.
Yeah. And it might just sort of hang around, even if it gets a little brave, even, or it's enjoying, someone getting their ass kicked. It might hang around. It's sort of, whatever creature they've lured you into, and then just like occasionally throw a shock out, and hoping to like put you down and use that bonus action to end you right away.
Yeah, and I have actually played a Will-o Wisp, and that's exactly what it did. It just floated around throughout the shock. And it tried to consume life, which I didn't actually get to. And then when its master died, it threw out another shock life, just trying to get the lowest player down to 0, and then fled.
Yeah, I remember that. And Chris were like, "No, I want to kill it."
Yeah. And there's just no way you were going to kill it. Even I think you guys were 4th level, and there's just no world in which you were going to hit an AC 19 enough to do 22 HP. No.
I had a suspicion that there was going to be a stupid thing in the stat block that we were both going to roll our eyes at, and I thought it was going to be something like, we have that common theme of false appearance in certain types of creatures, and that it was going to be like, it has advantage on such and such, or while it's in such and such a place. It's impossible to distinguish from, like, say, fireflies if it's within a group of fireflies or something like that. But I understand why they didn't do it, because you have to get like awfully specific in order to like make that an applicable attribute or ability.
It's also a lot bigger than a firefly.
I mean, it's a tiny. But I mean, the 3E described it as 1 foot. So 5E. I guess
how many 1 foot fireflies are you looking at? We're talking
right.
That's like 1,000 times the size of a firefly.
But what's the range of size for the tiny category in 5E is what I'm getting at. I don't know.
I don't believe there is one. I've always just used the 3E range.
Okay.
Which is the Pathfinder range. So
PHB says it's 2.5 by 2.5 feet. So at cap, right? That would be the largest. I guess that's probably more middling, because like small is 5 by 5 feet. So is medium.
Medium is 5 by 5.
But that's just for combat terms, not actual size of the creature for your grid. So yeah, hard to say, because I do sort of picture these things to be reasonably small, not to mention the fact that you're likely to see them at a distance to start, so it would be really hard, possibly. And because I know they can alter their colors, they could change the size of the light radius, they can completely wink out and disappear. You can really play with the perspective of your players and kind of lure them in kind of interesting ways. And I love the idea. Here's what I really love, and it would be possibly very unfair, but I love the idea that there's nothing to say that you just don't tell them that this is a creature that's next to you. If you're just like, if you were sort of guide your players into some magical area that has loads of motes of light floating around, but all of a sudden they bump into one, then it shocks them, and they bump into another, and then it shocks them, and they might never really know it's an actual creature unless they do the right check.
Right. Or, for example, maybe you earn the enmity of one after defeating its master in an ice cave, and it just follows you around, and you never really know it's there because you never happen to stumble in that square.
Oh, no, I'm scared.
And then when you're close to death, it's just going to take your life away from you.
Amazing. I mean, could happen.
A literal haunting spirit. There are ways to use this really, really creatively and really funnily, as long as you're doing it fairly and as long as you're tracking it on the map behind them, or what have you. But I think back to the initial point. I think it's a CR2 because that's how much you bump up whatever encounter it's in, because it's not adding to the encounter; it's adding to the lethality of the encounter, not the encounter itself, which I think, as much as they're the same thing, in this instance, I think they're two different metrics.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the the sort of downside to the CR system, these challenge ratings and stuff, they don't account for certain things, and one in particular is the death spiral, right? And this is a creature that can start a death spiral way early. So it's debatable because I don't think it should be any lower, but like that, that factoring in that death spiral really significantly changes the dynamic of an encounter. And it can happen real fast if it goes right.
Right, you're absolutely right. It could happen real fast, but how many creatures have we looked at like CR3, CR4 who already have 2 attacks? Mm-hmm. So like if a player goes down one round, doesn't stabilize, fails their death save, so they're down 1. The creature comes around again, they've got multi-attack, that player's dead anyway.
Right, yeah. But I mean, it's also... yes and no, because we do talk about this a lot, because not many creatures actually continue to beat on an unconscious creature. Not reasonably. Certain creatures, that's what they do. That is just what they do. They try to murder and destroy the life of something. So even when you go down, they will continue to assault you. But most do not. Most move on and reevaluate when there are more threats around, right? Which is the most likely case. So even a hungry hyena might stop for a second and take a look at the whole party before it dives into your unconscious throat. But this creature, very much not. Like very specifically not, right?
Yeah, I mean that's this creature's whole thing. But I was thinking like a ghoul where they just want to see end of life.
Such a typical undead thing too, right?
Yeah, something that wants to just end things, you know? I'm just double checking here real quick that a ghoul does have multi-attack because I don't know if it does. It doesn't, but I'm sure gas does. But anyway, my point is anything with multi-attack that wants that could take you out in one round if you've already failed your save. Mm-hmm. So like it's not that overpowered considering like if you've already failed 2 saves, this thing comes out of nowhere and shocks you and you're dead. Or, this thing comes out of nowhere and just consumes life because there's no reason for it to shock you. Like I get it and I see the issue, but I do also very much see a need for creatures like this in the DM's quiver to make it feel like there are stakes. Mm-hmm. Because often in our games, up until Rime of the Frostmaiden, actually, I don't know if I've ever done a good job of presenting you guys with the idea that there are stakes. Like this is life and death. I feel like most of the PCs I've killed, aside from every one of Carl's PCs, has been with the blessing of that player.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And but I mean that's it's one. It's a very difficult thing for the GM to do is to set that sense of desperation or life or death. And 2, 5e kind of plays against you for it because we've said it before, and it's not really a criticism per se, but the system is very forgiving when it comes to death. So you sort of, if people are okay with death, if your whole group's okay with death, you as the GM have the ability to become less forgiving, but you also still want to make sure you're being fair and legitimate about that sort of death. So this is a creature that you could use to really set that standard, but you don't have to do it on a player right away. What I almost feel like maybe you're getting at this already, but have one of these kill an important or a beloved NPC. While you're wading through the bog, or maybe they have a guide or something like that they're really getting along with, and just really set that tone for this creature. So the next time they see something like this, or they see one more of these things, the fear of the gods is put into them, because they know.
Well, that's the crazy thing about this is the Will-o Wisp, because it can just be invisible, period, as long as it wants.
Yeah,
this thing could just blink into existence, pull the life out of something, and then blink out of existence, and you would never have an opportunity to figure out what this thing actually was. Because it's a bonus action.
Yeah.
You use your bonus action, blink in, standard action, invisibility out. Like in less than 6 seconds, this creature has popped into existence, pulled the life out of something, and popped out of existence.
And if it happened to be injured, it just healed itself. you know. So
So narratively, I don't know how much wiggle room there is in that particular instance, but our listeners are incredibly creative and intelligent people, and they can come up with better ways to use them than I would. I would just use this exactly that way. It would follow you around after you had, maliciously destroyed its leader, and then the second you went to 0 HP, it would consume your life.
So brutal. Yeah. There's a potential to really set that tone and like really wow people and wow your players. There's always that potential you're going to piss someone off because they're going to feel like it wasn't fair, it was illegitimate, it was too fast, something like that.
Right.
But that's always you should always discuss that beforehand with your players, how they feel.
Yeah, that was going to be my caveat. Is I always discuss with my players whether or not they're okay with character death, and more importantly, I would have set this up in that initial encounter, like. Yeah. After you had killed the Hagmaster, this thing pops into existence, shocks you a bunch of times, gives you the opportunity to do a check on it to figure out what it is, and then just flies off into the ether and waits.
Yeah.
And waits. And waits. It follows you through an Illithid ship. It follows you to a goblin citadel. It follows you through town. And it just waits.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, that being said, with the lore, you had to be somewhat careful if you want to play it sort of, to its true nature. They are bound to certain areas. So, if that area happens to encompass a large area, a large geographical area where your characters are traveling from town to town, but it all really counts.
Like let's say Icewind Dale, for example.
Exactly. Like
just pulling an example out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere, yeah. Totally legit. But otherwise, definitely, if they leave the bog, for a nice lush green forest, perhaps this thing does not continue following them. Because it cannot. But yeah. All in all, I mean, I don't think there's really anything I would change. Like, there's a part of me that kind of likes the idea of having one that's a little bit more, maybe even souped up, that's, slightly more combat ready. I don't know.
Like an Archon?
No, nothing crazy, but like even just having a ranged shock attack on top of that it can just like zip from a slight distance or something like that. Something just a little beefier in health. I don't know, but otherwise, like the only reason I'm really saying that is I know that Pathfinder, has multiple versions of these. In whatever capacity, and they are like staggeringly different from this and each other. So
yeah.
Oh, the Archon Lantern. That's what you were talking about. Oh, okay. I feel like I was thinking of something else.
Yeah. So there's like a whole set of these Archons that are like. They're not axiomatic, but they're definitely on the more lawful side of the undead. The Lantern Archon is the one that pops into my mind because I played a summoner for so long.
Right, and that's from Pathfinder, right?
Yeah, this is from Pathfinder. Okay.
Yeah. They're essentially like a Will-o Wisps, but they land on that sort of good and lawful kind of part of the axis. Interesting. I do recall coming across that a little bit. Is there anything you would do differently?
Honestly, no. I like these creatures. I've used them before. I'll use them again. I think they're really good. I wouldn't use them as like a creature, but I think they're good like compendium creatures. And more than that, I think like you described them in the initial lore, I would actually use them more as like a trap than a creature now.
Right.
Like leads you to a spike pit or a quicksand where the quicksand drags you under, and then it just shoots this little lightning bolt out at you, and then pulls the life out of your mouth as you're going down.
Or add them to your growing hag campaign that I know all of our listeners are slowly building ever since we did that tweet. Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm with you. I would do the same thing. It'd be very akin to like harpies, trying to drag you off that cliff, or just like put you into that quicksand or that unforgiving mud that just sinks you in. What's the never-ending story one? The Swamp of Sadness or something like that.
Oh, I've honestly never seen it.
Oh no, really? It's like
Yeah.
the most horrible, harrowing, saddest scene of that film. It's so brutal.
Oh, is that the one where the horse goes down?
Yes. It's so
Yeah.
brutal. Oh, it's
Nothing about that story that anyone's ever told me has made me interested in the slightest.
that scene is just literally devastating to watch, and it seems campy when, especially on the surface. And
Just a horse.
If it's described
like,
to you,
what could be so special about a horse dying in the mud?
It's his horse. It's his horse. It's Atreyu's horse.
That's a boy? I thought Atreyu was a girl.
No.
Oh.
What's his horse
Okay.
name? I keep trying to remember it now. Artax. No, Artax. No. Oh,
All right.
Artax just gives up. He gives up because of the swamp of sadness. Oh no, I'm all
Yeah,
upset.
because his stupid boy rider rode a horse into a swamp like an idiot. Like, he should feel bad. It's his fault.
No,
I haven't seen the movie. I don't know
I
anything
was
about
saying,
it.
your opinion's illegitimate. You have no context.
But yeah, exactly. And I don't care. I'm not gonna watch it. And honestly, like, as an outsider, everything about it seems dumb. So
No, it's awesome. It's great.
all right. But what about you, listeners? Do you think that movie's any good? And if you do, explain to me concisely why it's good and why I should watch it.
New
And don't
Patreon
just
tier.
say vagaries.
New
Like,
Patreon tier.
it's good. Yeah.
We hit $100 a month. James will watch Neverending Story. I don't even know.
Yeah,
I
I'll
don't
watch
even know where we're at on
anything
Patreon.
for $100 a month. We get $100 a month, I'll watch any movie you want. I don't give a shit. Probably gonna watch it one day anyway.
Yeah.
But tell us about your Will-o Wisp stories. How would you use them? How would you change them, if anything? Do you like the idea of it following your party around? Do you like the idea of it as like a kite into a trap? Hit us up on the socials at EncounterPod or on Instagram at encounter.pod. You can find our previous episode on Pixies, where we initially referenced Jack-o'-lantern due to his queen Joan the Wand at encounterthis.ca. And if you want us to cover Minotaurs or the other one we said we were going to cover eventually, Nagas, you can find us on patreon.com/encounterpod for $10 a month. You can suggest a creature from this system or any other, including Pathfinder, or I'm sure there's a Never-Ending Story TTRPG. Maybe you can get Freeman to cover that dumb swamp horse.
Oh, dear.
$1 a month will get you access to our private Discord, and up $5 a month will get you a handwritten thank you letter and access to our shoutouts. You can see all of our spelling mistakes, and there's nothing too bad in this one. No fun languages to butcher, but it really does help us out. We are an independent podcast entirely supported by the generosity of those who donate to us on Patreon. So thank you to everyone who's ever bothered to donate once or recurring. It really does mean the world to us that you like it enough to give up your hard-earned dollars, because we certainly don't think it's worth it. If you don't want to do that, but you still want to help us out, if you could just rate and review us on your platform of choice, if your platform of choice allows such a thing, that really does help us out, find new listeners and new ears in the crowd who maybe want to help us out on Patreon or do their part by rating and reviewing. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in 2 weeks with Howlers. I'm gonna do Howlers.
Spoiler alert. God.
Spoilers. You deserve it. You made it to the end.